The click of the suitcase latch was the sound of my world ending. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the window pane, a furious, chaotic rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. His back was turned to me, a stiff, unyielding silhouette against the grey light. He never looked back, not even when I whispered the two words that should have changed everything. "I'm pregnant." He just paused his hand on the doorknob and said, without a hint of emotion, "That's your problem now, Sophie, not mine." He walked out, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his footsteps, a positive pregnancy test, and a crushing debt from funding his dreams. I thought that was the end of my story. I had no idea it was just the brutal, heartbreaking beginning of a life he would give anything to be a part of. My life with Roland Peterson had always been a story I told myself, with beautiful, hopeful words, ignoring the footnotes of doubt that were growing longer each year. We met in college. I was studying art history, lost in the romance of brushstrokes and forgotten eras, and he was a laser-focused business major talking about market caps and 5-year plans. He was my opposite, my anchor to the real world. Or so I thought. He was handsome, ambitious, and had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in his universe. We married young. I set aside my own modest dream of curating a small gallery to support his. I took a job as a freelance graphic designer, taking on tedious corporate logo work that paid the bills while he pursued his MBA. Our small apartment in Queen Anne was filled with his textbooks and my art supplies, a space that felt increasingly like his launch pad and my waiting room. Every spare dollar, every ounce of my emotional energy was invested in him. "When I make it big at Viridian Capital, Sophie," he'd say, kissing my forehead, "I'll buy you that gallery. We'll travel the world. Just be patient." Patience became my primary virtue. I celebrated his internship, his graduation, his first high-paying job at Viridian Capital, a prestigious investment firm downtown. I cooked his favorite meals, ironed his expensive shirts, and listened endlessly to his complaints about his boss, Gregory Hines, and his rivals at the firm. I was his cheerleader, his confidant, his partner, but as his salary grew, so did the distance between us. He started working later, his business dinners became more frequent, and the woman he often mentioned, Naomi Decker, the daughter of a real estate tycoon, became a recurring character in his stories. Naomi's father could be a huge client, he'd explain, shrugging off my unease. "It's all about networking, Soph." The day it all fell apart began with a dizzy spell. I'd been feeling off for weeks, a quiet hum of fatigue and nausea I'd dismissed as stress. But on that rainy Tuesday the world tilted, and a small, thrilling, terrifying suspicion bloomed in my mind. I bought a test on my way home from a client meeting. 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Joy, pure and electric, shot through me. This was it. This was the one thing that could bridge the growing gap between us. A baby. Our baby. It would make us a family again. I planned to tell him over a special dinner, but he came home late, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. He was cold, distant, and agitated. He didn't want dinner. He wanted to talk. "Sophie, we need to be realistic." He began pacing the living room we'd furnished with my meager freelance earnings. "My career is at a critical stage. The partners are looking at me for the next promotion. I need to be agile, unencumbered." "Unencumbered? What are you talking about, Roland?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "I'm talking about us," he said, finally stopping to look at me. His eyes, once so warm, were like chips of ice. "This isn't working anymore. I need a different kind of partner. Someone who understands my world. Someone who can help me move forward, not hold me back." The words were a physical blow. "Hold you back. I've done nothing but support you. I put my life on hold for you. And I appreciate that." He said the phrase dripping with condescending finality. "But we're on different paths now." That's when I saw the suitcase already packed, standing by the door. It was real. He was leaving. Panic seized me, and I blurted out the only thing I had left. "Roland, wait," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." I expected him to stop to turn around, for the ice in his eyes to melt. I expected shock, maybe even fear, but something human. Something that acknowledged the life we created. Instead, he just paused. The silence stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds. Then came the words that would be seared into my memory forever. "That's your problem now, Sophie. Not mine." He opened the door and walked out into the rain without another glance. The latch clicked shut. I stood there frozen until my legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor, my hand protectively covering my still flat stomach. I was 28 years old, pregnant in debt from his student loans that were in my name, and completely, utterly alone. The world wasn't just grey, it had lost all colour. For the next few weeks, I operated in a fog of grief and survival. I called my best friend Jessica, who came over with groceries and righteous fury, her words a temporary balm on my gaping wound. I called his parents, who offered clipped, uncomfortable sympathies before making it clear they stood with their son. The financial reality hit me like a second tidal wave. Roland had been the primary earner. My income barely covered the rent, and now I had his student loan payments to contend with. He'd convinced me to co-sign, promising to refinance as soon as he got his first big bonus. He drained our joint savings account, leaving me with $280. I started selling my furniture, my old art books, anything of value just to keep the lights on. Every day was a battle against morning sickness and mounting panic. I was drowning, and the man I had given everything to had not only refused to throw me a life raft, he had pushed me into the water. Life settled into a grim routine. I woke up, fought off a wave of nausea, worked 12-hour days on soul-crushing design projects for pennies, ate cheap ramen, and fell into a restless sleep, often waking up from nightmares where I heard the click of that suitcase latch over and over. Jessica was my rock, but I could see the toll my despair was taking on her. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life. About 2 months after Roland left, a letter arrived. It was different from the red-lettered bills and junk mail that usually filled my mailbox. The envelope was thick, creamy cardstock with an embossed return address, Carter Dean and Partners, LLP, Park Avenue, New York. My heart sank. I assumed it was another debt collector, a more sophisticated one perhaps. With a sigh, I tore it open. The letterhead was heavy, the typeface elegant. It was addressed to me, Ms. Sophie Miller. "Dear Ms. Miller, it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you of the passing of your great-uncle, Mr. Walter Hemlock. I am Benjamin Carter, the executor of Mr. Hemlock's estate and his long-time legal counsel. Mr. Hemlock has named you as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. It is imperative that you contact my office at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting in New York. The matters to be discussed are of significant and urgent importance." I read it 3 times. Walter Hemlock, I barely remembered him. He was my grandmother's estranged brother, a figure spoken of in hushed, almost mythical tones. I'd met him once at a family funeral when I was 6. I remembered a tall, quiet man with kind eyes and a tweed jacket that smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. He had given me a crisp $5 bill and told me to always invest in curiosity. My grandmother had passed away years ago, and with her any connection to that side of the family. My first thought was that it was a mistake, or worse, a cruel scam. Sole beneficiary of what, an old watch and a box of dusty books. Still, the name of the law firm was real. A quick search on my phone confirmed they were one of the most prestigious firms in the country. A sliver of hope, something I hadn't felt in months, pierced through the gloom. With nothing left to lose, I used the last of my credit to book the cheapest flight I could find to New York. The offices of Carter, Dean and Partners were on the 50th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. The lobby was a symphony of marble-polished brass and hushed importance. I felt small and shabby in my second-hand dress. Benjamin Carter was the opposite of what I expected. He wasn't a stuffy, intimidating lawyer. He was a man in his late 60s with the same kind eyes I remembered from my great-uncle, a warm smile and a calming presence. He greeted me not as a client, but as a long-lost acquaintance. "Sophie, thank you for coming," he said, guiding me into a vast office lined with leather-bound books. "Your great-uncle spoke of you often. He was very proud of the woman you were becoming." "He did. I barely knew him," I stammered, sinking into a plush leather chair. "Walter was a private man," Mr. Carter explained, sitting opposite me. "He and your grandmother had a falling out decades ago, but he never stopped keeping track of his family. He knew about your art studies, your marriage. He knew your husband worked at Viridian Capital." My breath hitched at the mention of Roland. "Sophie, there's no easy way to say this, so I will be direct." Mr. Carter continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Walter was an exceptionally shrewd and successful man. He built an empire from nothing. He never married and had no children. His life's work is now yours." He slid a thick leather-bound portfolio across the mahogany desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't just a will. It was a summary of assets. The numbers didn't make sense. They were followed by too many zeros. I saw names of corporations, stock portfolios, real estate holdings. There was a brownstone on the Upper East Side, a vineyard in Napa Valley, a collection of post-impressionist art, and a controlling interest in a diverse holding company called the Hemlock Group. The Hemlock Group, Mr. Carter elaborated, has significant investments across multiple sectors: technology, green energy publishing, and finance. My eyes scanned the list of financial holdings, my brain struggling to process the information. Then one name jumped out from the page, and all the air left my lungs. It was listed under Major Equity Stakes. Viridian Capital. "No," I whispered, my voice hoarse. That can't be right." "It is," Mr. Carter confirmed, his gaze steady and knowing. "The Hemlock Group is one of the primary silent investors in the fund that employs your estranged husband. Walter acquired the stake 2 years ago. To be precise, Sophie, you now indirectly own a 17% stake in the partnership. You are, for all intents and purposes, Roland Peterson's boss's boss." I stared at him, my mind reeling. The irony was so staggering, so cosmically cruel and beautiful, that I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the hysterical, unhinged laughter of a woman whose world had been shattered, glued back together in the wrong shape, and then shattered again, only this time the pieces were made of solid gold. The struggling, abandoned, pregnant wife was gone. In her place sat one of the wealthiest women in the country, with the power to crush the man who had left her with nothing but a broken heart and a pile of debt. The game had just changed, and I was holding all the cards. The weeks that followed were a surreal blur. Benjamin Carter became my guide through the labyrinth of my new life. He was more than a lawyer. He was a mentor, a protector, the stable father figure I never really had. He arranged for the immediate settlement of all my debts, including Roland's student loans. A single wire transfer wiped out the red ink that had been suffocating me. The relief was so profound, it felt like I could breathe again for the first time in years. I left the cramped, sad apartment in Seattle behind. Ben, as he insisted I call him, had the brownstone on the Upper East Side professionally cleaned and staffed. When I walked in for the first time, I was overwhelmed. It wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary filled with Walter's collection of books and art. It felt like a home, imbued with the quiet intelligence of the man who had saved me without ever really knowing me. My first priority was my baby. Ben connected me with the best obstetricians in New York. I had access to prenatal care I could only have dreamed of. I started eating well resting, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel unadulterated joy about the life growing inside me. I would sit for hours in Walter's library, my hand on my swelling belly, and read to my unborn child from the classic novels. I was no longer a single terrified mother-to-be. I was a matriarch, the founder of a new legacy. The second priority was understanding the empire Walter had left me. Ben arranged for a team of tutors, financial analysts, corporate lawyers, and investment strategists. My days became a rigorous curriculum in wealth management. I learned about EBITDA, leveraged buyouts, and hostile takeovers. The art history major, who once got lost in Monet's water lilies, was now studying stock market fluctuations and board governance. It was daunting, but I discovered a part of myself I never knew existed. I had a sharp, analytical mind that had been dormant for years, suppressed by the need to be Roland's supportive, non-threatening partner. I was a quick study. I wasn't just inheriting wealth, I was learning how to wield it. Walter wasn't just rich Sophie. Ben told me during one of our sessions. He was powerful because he was underestimated. He was quiet, observant. He never played his hand until the last possible moment. He saw the same quiet strength in you. Those words resonated deep within me. I started to change. I cut my hair into a chic, no-nonsense bob. I traded my worn-out clothes for tailored power suits and elegant dresses. The transformation was more than skin-deep. The perpetual fear in my eyes was replaced by a cool, appraising confidence. I was no longer Sophie Miller, the abandoned wife. I was Ms. Miller, the chairwoman of the Hemlock Group. I made my first major decision at a board meeting 3 months into my new life. The Hemlock Group was considering divesting from a small ethical tech startup to free up capital for a less savory but more profitable venture. My financial advisors recommended the divestment. I listened to all the arguments, analyzed the data, and then made my choice. No, I said, my voice clear and steady in the silent boardroom. We're not divesting. We're doubling our investment. I've read their projections on sustainable energy solutions. This isn't just about profit. It's about the future. The board was stunned, but they complied. I had found my philosophy to build, not just to acquire, to use Walter's legacy to create something meaningful. All this time there was no word from Roland. I had a team ensure my new identity was kept under wraps. As far as the world knew, the Hemlock Group was still being managed by its board, under the direction of the estate's executor. Roland had no idea that the woman he'd discarded like trash was now living a life of unimaginable privilege and power, a few miles away from his Wall Street office. The thought brought a grim, satisfying smile to my face. The anonymity, however, couldn't last forever. Ben advised me that I would need to make a public appearance eventually to assert my position and quell rumors about the future of the company. He suggested the annual Metropolitan Charity Gala, the pinnacle of New York's philanthropic scene. The Hemlock Group was a major sponsor. "It's time, Sophie," he said gently. "It's time for the world to meet you." I was terrified, but I knew he was right. On the night of the gala, I stood before a full-length mirror in the Brownstones' master suite. I was wearing a custom-made navy blue gown that shimmered under the light. Diamonds, part of Walter's estate, glittered at my neck and ears. I was 6 months pregnant, my baby bump, a proud, beautiful curve under the silk. Looking at my reflection, I barely recognized the weeping woman I had been. She was gone. In her place stood a queen ready to claim her kingdom. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a dazzling spectacle of wealth and influence. I walked in with Ben Carter by my side, a calm port in a storm of flashing cameras and murmuring voices. The moment we entered, a ripple went through the crowd. Who was this new woman on the arm of the powerful executor of the Hemlock estate? Ben introduced me simply as Ms. Sophie Miller, the new head of the Hemlock Group. The news spread through the ballroom like wildfire. I shook hands with senators, tech billionaires, and cultural icons. They saw a poised, intelligent woman, the mysterious heiress to a legendary fortune. They had no idea that less than a year ago, I had been counting pennies to afford groceries. I was in the middle of a conversation with a museum curator when I felt a familiar pair of eyes on me. I turned my head slowly. Across the room, standing near a champagne fountain, was Roland. He was with a group from Viridian Capital. I recognized his boss, Gregory Hines, and several others from company Christmas parties. And on Roland's arm was Naomi Decker, dripping in designer jewels and looking possessively at him. Roland's face was a mask of utter disbelief. He was staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. His champagne glass tilted in his hand, a small amount spilling onto the polished floor. His jaw was slack, his eyes wide with confusion, scanning my expensive gown, the diamonds, my confident posture, and finally my very pregnant belly. The blood drained from his face. Our eyes locked for a moment across the crowded room. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I gave him nothing. I simply held his gaze, my expression cool and unreadable, before turning back to the curator and continuing my conversation as if he didn't exist. It was the most powerful thing I had ever done. For the rest of the night, I could feel him watching me. I saw him whispering furiously to Naomi, who kept shooting venomous, confused glances in my direction. I saw him approach his boss, Gregory, who looked over at me with a new sudden expression of deep respect and anxiety. The pieces were clicking into place in Roland's opportunistic mind. The next day, my phone a new number he couldn't possibly have buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sophie, is that really you? I saw you last night. You look amazing. We need to talk." I deleted it without replying. Then came the emails to my personal account, which he must have remembered. Subject: Sophie, please. I don't know what's going on, but I've made a terrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I was stressed. I was an idiot. I think about you every day. I think about our baby. Our baby. The hypocrisy was so blatant, it was almost laughable. I screenshotted it and sent it to my personal lawyer, another part of the team Ben had assembled for me. The call started a day later. He somehow got the number for the Brownstones' landline. My housekeeper, a wonderfully stern woman named Mrs. Gable, answered. "The Miller residence," she said in her crisp British accent. I heard her pause. "And who may I say is calling?" "Peterson." "I'm sorry, sir, Miss Miller is not available. Please do not call this number again." She hung up with a decisive click. Roland's desperation began to seep into his professional life. Ben received a call from a frantic Gregory Hines at Viridian Capital. "Ben, my apologies for the back-channel call," Hines said, his voice strained. "But one of my junior VPs, Roland Peterson, seems to be under the impression that he has a personal relationship with your new chairwoman, Ms. Miller. He's making some rather wild claims. Is there any truth to this?" Ben's reply was a masterclass in corporate ambiguity. Ms. Miller's personal life is, of course, private. However, I can confirm that she is well aware of Mr. Peterson's existence. She trusts that Viridian's management will ensure all employees maintain the highest standards of professional conduct and do not attempt to leverage fabricated personal connections for professional gain. The message was clear. Roland was becoming a liability. The final, most pathetic attempt came a week later. A courier delivered a large bouquet of expensive lilies to the brownstone. The card attached was handwritten, "Sophie, I love you. I never stopped. I was a fool who was dazzled by the wrong things. Naomi means nothing to me. You and our child are my world. Let me come home. Let me be a father to my son or daughter. I'll do anything. Please just give me a chance to make it right. All my love, Roland." I read the card, my expression unmoving. Then I walked to the kitchen, handed the flowers to Mrs. Gable and said, "Please put these in the staff room, Mrs. Gable, and please throw the card in the trash." He thought this was about love, about a second chance. He didn't understand. This was never about getting him back. This was about building a life so magnificent that his absence was a footnote, not the main story. He was trying to get back into a book that was already finished. A new one had begun, and he wasn't even a character in it. Roland Peterson did not take silence for an answer. His attempts to contact me escalated from pathetic to professionally suicidal. He started trying to use his position at Viridian Capital to get to me name-dropping the Hemlock Group in meetings, hinting at a deep personal connection to its new mysterious owner. It was a foolish, desperate gamble, and it was about to backfire spectacularly. The final straw came when Viridian Capital was preparing its quarterly investor report. Roland, in a move of stunning audacity, tried to attach a personal addendum to the report being sent to the Hemlock Group, a letter addressed directly to me. Gregory Hines, his boss, intercepted it. Livid and terrified of alienating a 17% stakeholder, he called Ben Carter immediately. "Ben, I am so sorry," Hines stammered over the phone. "Peterson has been dealt with. His employment at Viridian is terminated effective immediately." Ben and I discussed the situation. Firing him was easy, but it wasn't enough. It was a consequence, but it didn't provide the closure I needed. It didn't force him to confront the reality of what he had done. "He needs to see you," Ben said, his voice firm. "He needs to understand the power you now hold. Not for revenge, Sophie. For resolution." I agreed. We arranged a meeting. Not in my home, not in a neutral restaurant. We summoned him to the main boardroom of the Hemlock Group's headquarters on the 61st floor of a skyscraper in the financial district. Roland arrived looking like a man walking to his own execution. He had clearly spent a fortune on a new suit, but his face was pale and drawn. The arrogance he once wore like a second skin was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry look. He was led into the boardroom by my assistant. I was already there, seated at the head of a 30-foot-long mahogany table. I wasn't alone. Ben Carter sat to my right, and my lead corporate counsel, a sharp woman named Ms. Jennings, sat to my left. I was now 7 months pregnant, and I made no effort to hide my baby bump. I wore a crimson dress the color of power. I did not stand when he entered. "Roland," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast, silent room. "Thank you for coming. Sophie. He breathed, his eyes darting from me to Ben to the lawyer and back to me. He took a hesitant step forward. Soph, you look incredible. I've been trying to reach you. I've been going out of my mind. I know, I said calmly. Your unprofessional conduct at Viridian Capital has been brought to our attention. That is partly why we are here. The color drained further from his face. That was a mistake. I just wanted to talk to you, away from all this. He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. This isn't you, Sophie. On the contrary, I replied, my voice dangerously soft. I've never felt more like myself. But let's not waste time on pleasantries. You wanted to talk. Let's talk. What do you want, Roland? He seemed to take this as an invitation. He took another step forward, his voice dropping into the intimate, manipulative tone he used to use so effectively. I want you. I want our baby. I want my family back. I was an idiot. I was blinded by ambition, by people like Naomi. It was all a mistake. The money, this power, it doesn't have to change us. I let him finish my expression, unreadable. When he was done, a heavy silence filled the room. Us, I finally said, leaning forward slightly. There is no us, Roland. You burned that bridge the day you walked out and called our child my problem. Let's be honest with each other for the first time in a long time. You don't want us. You want access. You saw me at the gala, you did the math, and you saw a lottery ticket you thought you'd thrown away. No, that's not true, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Isn't it? I pressed my voice, gaining a steely edge. Let me be perfectly clear. You are here today for one reason only, to be served with this. Ms. Jennings slid a document across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of him. That is a legally binding agreement, she stated, her tone glacial. It relinquishes any and all future parental claims to the child in exchange for a one-time sealed payment that will cover any outstanding debts you may have. It also includes a permanent non-negotiable restraining order and a non-disclosure agreement that forbids you from ever speaking about Miss Miller or her child publicly or privately. Roland stared at the document as if it were a snake. Parental claims. A restraining order. Sophie, you can't do this. I am the father. I have rights. Rights. I scoffed, the sound sharp and humorless. Did you think about my rights when you left me pregnant and penniless? Did you think about our child's rights when you abandoned us for a woman with a richer father? You have no rights, Roland. You abdicated them. He looked at me, his eyes wild with desperation. I won't sign it. I'll take you to court. I'll tell everyone we'll have a custody battle. This was the moment, the final checkmate. I leaned back in my chair, placing a hand on my belly, and gave him a small, pitying smile. You're still thinking like a junior VP, Roland. Let me explain how this works from the chairwoman's seat. You want a custody battle. Fine. I will hire the best legal team in the country. We will drag this out for years. We will subpoena your phone records, your emails, your financial statements. We will depose Naomi Decker and her father. We will expose every single lie and every dirty secret you have. It will be the most public, most humiliating chapter of your life. And in the end, you will lose. I paused, letting the words sink in. And while all that is happening, the Hemlock Group will use its significant influence in the financial sector to ensure that the name Roland Peterson is toxic. No firm on Wall Street will touch you. You won't be able to get a job managing a Starbucks. I will not just defeat you in court, Roland. I will erase you from the world you so desperately want to be a part of. He stared at me, his mouth agape. The charismatic, confident man I had married was gone. In his place was a small, terrified boy who had picked a fight with a giant and only just realized it. "Sign the papers, Roland," I said, my voice now a quiet command. "Take the money. Disappear. It is the only good deal you will ever get from me." He stood there for a full minute, trembling. Then, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, he walked to the table, picked up the pen, and signed his name. He didn't look at me again. He just turned and walked out of the boardroom, a ghost leaving his own life behind. When the door closed, I finally let out a long, shuddering breath. It wasn't a victory, I felt, not really. It was a profound, aching sadness for the woman I used to be, and a quiet, steely resolve for the woman I had become. The past was finally truly buried. In the wake of the boardroom confrontation, a profound and heavy silence descended, the kind that follows a long and brutal storm. Roland Peterson was gone. He had signed the papers, taken the settlement, and dematerialized from my life as completely as a phantom at sunrise. The process was surgically precise. My lead counsel, Ms. Jennings, confirmed the wire transfer to a newly opened bank account, the receipt of the signed non-disclosure agreement, and the court filing of the permanent restraining order. Every legal door was sealed, every loose end cauterized. A week later, Ben Carter quietly slid a tablet across his desk to me, displaying a short blurb from a vapid online society column. It was a photo of Naomi Decker at some charity auction, smiling brightly on the arm of a much older, more established banking scion. The caption noted her amicable split from junior financier Roland Peterson, wishing him the best in his future endeavors. It was a cold transactional dismissal, a public relations execution. Roland had been an asset, his value had plummeted, and he had been liquidated. He was utterly, completely alone, a fate he had so meticulously crafted for himself. With his ghost finally exorcised, I could breathe. The constant low-grade tension that had coiled in my shoulders for nearly a year finally began to unwind. I poured that reclaimed energy into the two burgeoning empires that demanded my attention, my child and my company. The third trimester of my pregnancy was a time of intense, focused creation. In the sunniest corner of the brownstone overlooking the garden, I designed the nursery myself. I painted murals of gentle, soaring birds on the walls and assembled a crib of pale, sturdy oak with my own hands. Each screw tightened, each brushstroke applied, was an act of love. A declaration that this child was entering a world of deliberate warmth and unwavering security. This room was a sanctuary, a stark contrast to the cold, ambitious apartment I had shared with a man who saw a child as nothing more than an anchor. Simultaneously, I laid the groundwork for my first major initiative as chairwoman, the Hemlock Lantern Foundation. I gathered a small, dedicated board, and in our first meeting, I articulated its mission with a clarity born from painful experience. This foundation, I told them, my voice steady, will be a lifeline for women who find themselves at the mercy of circumstances they did not create. It will fund education, provide grants for female entrepreneurs, and offer legal aid to those escaping abusive situations. We will not be giving handouts. We will be providing tools for them to build their own fortresses. I was building the safety net I never had, transforming my personal trauma into a public good. My son was born on a crisp October morning, as the first autumn leaves began to fall in Central Park. The delivery was long and arduous, but I was not the terrified, isolated woman I would have been just months prior. I was surrounded by a world-class medical team, with Ben Carter pacing the hall like an anxious grandfather. Through it all, I felt a deep well of strength inside me, a primal power I never knew I possessed. The moment they placed him in my arms, a tiny squirming bundle of life, the final fractured pieces of my old heart fused together, healed and made whole. A love so fierce and absolute washed over me, eclipsing everything that had come before. He was perfect. He was mine. I named him Leo Hemlock Miller, honoring the man who had saved us, and cementing a new proud lineage that had no need for the name Peterson. Life settled into a beautiful, demanding rhythm. Days were a whirlwind of board meetings and financial reports, nights a quiet symphony of lullabies and whispered promises to my sleeping son. Leo's first year was a cascade of precious milestones. His first smile, his first tooth, his first shaky steps clutching my fingers. On his first birthday, we held a small celebration in the brownstone. It wasn't a lavish affair, just myself, a beaming Ben Carter, and my wonderfully stern housekeeper Mrs. Gable. We ate cake, Leo smeared icing all over his face, and we laughed. In that simple sunlit room, I felt the profound truth of what I had built a real family, forged not by blood, but by loyalty and love. Later that evening, after Leo was asleep in his crib, Ben asked to speak with me in the library. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow on the leather-bound books that lined the walls. His expression was gentle, but carried a unique gravity that put me on alert. "Sophie with Leo, now a year old, there is one final piece of your great-uncle's estate that I must share with you," he began, his voice low. Walter was an exceptionally careful man. He planned for every contingency. He gave me specific instructions to wait until you were firmly established, and the child was here before revealing this. He called it his fail-safe. From his leather briefcase, he produced a thin sealed envelope made of the same heavy, creamy cardstock as the very first letter that had changed my life. My name was written on the front in Walter's familiar, spidery script. My heart hammered against my ribs as I took it. With trembling fingers, I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter written just months before Walter passed away. "My dearest Sophie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have stepped into a world that must feel both bewildering and immense. There is much I wish I could have said to you in person, a foolishness I regret. I did not just watch you from afar. I tried to understand you. I saw your kindness and your loyalty. I also saw your husband, Roland Peterson. I saw him for exactly what he was, a shallow vessel of ambition, a man who saw you not as a partner, but as a stepping stone. My investigators, yes, I had them looked into, confirmed he was a leech, and I feared he would bleed you dry of not just your finances, but your spirit. The 17% stake I acquired in Viridian Capital was not a random investment. It was a strategic purchase. It was a loaded gun I placed in your hand, hoping you would never have to use it, but ensuring it was there if you did. But I am a cynic, my dear, and I know men like him. The agreement you had him sign was a necessary and powerful move. However, I worried that a man with no morals might one day find a legal loophole, a way to claw his way back into your child's life once he realized the true scale of the fortune at stake. So I took one final precaution. Benjamin will now explain the Hemlock Progeny Trust. I looked up from the letter, my mind reeling. The Progeny Trust? What is he talking about, then? Ben's expression was one of solemn admiration. Walter was a genius, Sophie, a legal artist. The bulk of the estate you inherited is, in fact, held in a highly complex, ironclad trust. You are the lifetime trustee and beneficiary with full control. However, upon your death, the entire fortune does not pass directly to your heir in a simple transfer. Its distribution is governed by the Hemlock Progeny Trust. He slid a thick-bound document towards me. This trust has a very specific, and I must say, brilliant clause. It's what Walter privately called the Proven Parent Clause. It stipulates that for any of your direct descendants to inherit the full, unrestricted principle of the Hemlock fortune, both of their legal parents must be verifiably proven to have been active, supportive, and present in the heir's life from the moment of birth until the age of majority. It requires decades of evidence, school records, medical documents, sworn affidavits from caregivers, teachers, and community members. It creates a legal requirement for good, consistent, and documented parenting from both sides. My breath caught in my throat as the staggering implication began to dawn on me. But here is the master stroke. Ben continued, his voice barely above a whisper. If one parent is found to be absent, neglectful, or has formally relinquished their rights, as Roland has done, the clause enacts a penalty. The absent parent is, of course, barred from any connection to the trust. But more importantly, the trust is structured so that the heir Leo, in this case, would still inherit a generous but significantly smaller fraction of the fortune. The vast majority of the estate's capital and its annual profits are then automatically and irrevocably diverted to a portfolio of charities. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the silent room. The diversion is specifically recorded in the public record under a permanent heading established by Walter himself, the Roland Peterson Paternal Failure Fund. The air left my lungs in a rush. I stared at Ben, speechless. It was a move of such breathtaking, posthumous ruthlessness that I felt a dizzying wave of shock and awe. Walter hadn't just built me a shield, he had forged an inescapable psychological trap. He had weaponized Roland's own greed against him in perpetuity. If Roland ever tried to challenge the agreement, if he somehow managed to reinsert himself into Leo's life, his very presence as a legal parent would cost his own son billions. The only way for Leo to receive his full inheritance was for Roland Peterson to remain a ghost. Staying away was the only profitable option. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in my eyes and streamed down my face. This quiet, distant man I had met only once had seen everything. He hadn't just given me money. He had meticulously, brilliantly, and ferociously protected me. He had reached forward from the grave to stand guard over my son, ensuring that the predator who had abandoned us could never, ever return. He had given me the most precious gift of all absolute and everlasting freedom. The years that followed were not a blur, but a series of distinct, sunlit moments that stitched the fabric of my new life together. The sharp, metallic taste of betrayal, once a constant presence, had long since faded, replaced by the sweetness of freshly baked cookies and the earthy scent of playground mulch. Our brownstone on the Upper East Side, once a silent testament to a stranger's legacy, now echoed with the vibrant sounds of a childhood in full swing. It was in the thunder of small feet on the grand staircase, the cheerful mess of finger paints on a Gilded Age dining table, and the quiet ritual of reading bedtime stories in a room filled with Walter's priceless first editions. My son Leo was the sun around which my universe now orbited. He grew from a gurgling infant into a bright, inquisitive boy with a startlingly compassionate heart. He had my artistic eye and Walter's quiet, observant nature, a combination that made him both a dreamer and a thinker. He was my purpose, the living, breathing embodiment of my second chance. My role as the chairwoman of the Hemlock Group solidified from a position I had inherited into a calling I had earned. I learned to navigate the treacherous currents of Wall Street with a steady hand, my quiet demeanor, often mistaken for weakness, right before I proved it to be my greatest strength. I guided the company with a new philosophy, divesting from predatory industries and pouring capital into sustainable technology and ethical startups. We didn't just chase profits, we chased progress. Once a year, I would review the annual report for the Walter Hemlock Foundation, and every year, I would pause at the same line item in the public filing a small, almost hidden detail that brought a grim smile to my face: the disbursement of funds from the Roland Peterson Paternal Failure Fund. It had become a quiet, institutionalized monument to his absence, its profits, helping thousands of single mothers get the support I never had. It was a perfect poetic justice, executed with the cold, silent precision of a legal document. One radiant spring afternoon when Leo was 5, the city seemed to shimmer with possibility. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the air in Central Park was fragrant with cherry blossoms. Leo, dressed in a tiny superhero t-shirt, was a whirlwind of joyous energy, chasing a bright red ball across the vast green expanse of the sheep meadow. His laughter, the purest sound I had ever known. I sat on a bench, watching him, feeling a sense of peace so profound it felt like a physical warmth spreading through my chest. This was it. This was the life I had built from the ashes of another. It was then that I felt it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, the prickling sensation of being watched. It was a primal, instinctual feeling that momentarily chilled the warm afternoon. I scanned the periphery, my gaze sweeping over laughing families and sunbathing students. And then I saw him. He was standing near the edge of the path about 100 yards away, partially obscured by the thick trunk of an old oak tree. It took my mind a second to process the image, to connect this stranger to the spectre from my past. It was Roland. The man I saw was a faded watercolor of the sharp, vibrant portrait I held in my memory. The bespoke suit was gone, replaced by a drab, ill-fitting jacket. The confident, predatory stride had been worn down to a defeated slump of the shoulders. He was older, of course, but it was more than that. He looked tired, not just physically, but existentially, a man hollowed out by the ghosts of his own choices. He was staring, his focus entirely fixed on the small boy in the superhero shirt. His expression was a devastating tapestry of emotions I could read even from a distance: raw longing, corrosive regret, and the profound, aching loss of a man staring through a window at a life he was permanently locked out of. He was watching his son, the billion-dollar heir he would never know, and the world he had so casually discarded. A jolt of ice-cold adrenaline shot through me, a reflexive echo of old fear. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the cool, detached assessment I now used in the boardroom. I was no longer looking at the man who broke my heart. I was looking at a failed asset, a catastrophic miscalculation from a former life. The anger I once thought would burn forever was gone. The hatred had evaporated. All that remained in its place was a vast, quiet, and unshakable pity. Our eyes met. Across the great green lawn, a chasm of years and choices, his gaze locked with mine. In that silent, stretched-out moment, I saw the full scope of his defeat. He saw in my eyes not hatred or triumph, but something far worse: indifference. He saw a woman who was whole without him, a world that had flourished in his absence. A flicker of sheer panic crossed his face, the terror of a ghost being seen, and he broke contact. He turned abruptly, his movements clumsy, and hurried and walked away, melting back into the anonymous city crowd that had swallowed him years ago. He knew the rules of the cruel, brilliant game Walter had set. He could look, but he could never get closer. He was a phantom cursed to haunt the edges of a paradise he had willingly forfeited. My attention snapped back to the present as Leo came running towards me, his face flushed with exertion and pure joy, the red ball clutched triumphantly in his hands. "Mommy, I got it. Did you see how fast I ran?" he shouted blissfully, unaware of the spectre that had just passed through our perfect afternoon. I knelt on the grass and opened my arms, wrapping him in a fierce hug, burying my face in the sweet, clean scent of his hair. "I saw you, my love," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion he was too young to understand. I saw everything. Holding my son, the true weight of my inheritance settled upon me. It was never the money, the brownstone, or the controlling shares. Walter's greatest gift was this moment, the freedom to be a mother without fear, the strength to build a world for my son, defined only by love and security. Roland Peterson hadn't left me with a problem to be solved. He had unwittingly given me my life's purpose. He had tried to be the final tragic chapter of my story, but instead, he was nothing more than the dark, necessary prologue to the epic of the queen who built her own castle not for a king but for her beloved prince. And in that kingdom, forged in resilience and ruled by love, there was no space, not even a shadow, for regret. Sophie's journey from a heartbroken, abandoned woman to a powerful, self-assured matriarch is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments can often be the foundation for our greatest strengths. She didn't just inherit a fortune, she inherited an opportunity to rediscover her own worth, a worth that was never tied to the man who failed to see it. Her story asks us a powerful question. What do we do when the world we built crumbles? Do we stay in the ruins, or do we use the rubble to build an empire stronger than before? Sophie chose to build not just for herself, but for her son, and for countless others. If this story of resilience, justice, and empowerment moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more real-life stories of triumph and transformation. What did you think of Sophie's final silent confrontation with Roland in the park? Let me know in the comments below.